Imagine a sky filled with cosmic dust and rock fragments traveling through the void of space. At the heart of this chaos, a young star shines brightly, the sun. Around it, fragments of matter collide, merge, and transform into something larger. It is in this scenario, around 4.5 billion years ago, that our planet began to take shape. But the Earth you know today was something unimaginable. In the beginning, the Earth was not blue and welcoming. It was an incandescent inferno, a blazing ball of fire where boiling magma dominated the surface. Temperatures were so high that no life, not even the most primitive, could exist. But how could something so hostile become the cradle of life? The answers lie in the catastrophic events that shaped our planet. Between them, a collision that would change everything. Imagine a gigantic celestial body, the size of Mars, coming towards Earth at high speed. Her name was Theia. When it finally reached our planet, the impact was devastating. Pieces of the Earth were thrown into space, forming a ring of debris that, over time, agglomerated to give rise to the Moon. Yes, our natural satellite is the result of this epic cosmic collision. But this explosion was not the end. It was just the beginning. After the impact, the Earth began to slowly cool. Over millions of years, the glowing surface transformed into something more stable. The Earth's crust formed, and at some point, something miraculous happened. The first drops of liquid water appeared. It was not a quick or easy process. Water came from comets and meteors that ceaselessly fell on the planet, bringing with them the essential ingredient for life. And so the transformation began. The Earth, once a lava hell, now had pristine oceans covering much of its surface. But these seas were different from the ones we know. They were not crystal clear or inviting. They were cloudy, hot, full of minerals and chemical substances that would later serve as a cradle for the first forms of life. However, the question remains: how did something so inhospitable, so full of chaos and destruction, manage to begin a process that would culminate in something as complex as life? This first phase of Earth's history shows us that destruction and creation go hand in hand. Theia's impact could have been the end of our planet. Instead, it was the catalyst for a new beginning. Water, an essential element, only got here because of the incessant collisions of celestial bodies. Each catastrophic event seemed like an insurmountable obstacle, but somehow they created the perfect conditions for the next chapter of this story. Now that the planet has begun to stabilize, the stage is set for something even more extraordinary: the emergence of life. But what would it take to transform simple molecules into living organisms? And how did these first beings resist in such a brutal environment? The answer to these questions takes us to a new era on Earth, where the impossible begins to become reality. But for now, let's leave these questions in the air. Because, first of all, we need to understand that our planet is living proof that even the most extreme conditions can give rise to something extraordinary. And the Earth was just beginning its journey. So, what did the future hold for this young planet? Stay with me to explore how Earth, now with oceans and an emerging atmosphere, would begin to chart the path to the origin of life. The adventure has barely begun, and the next step promises to be even more fascinating. Earth was ready for the next act of its incredible story. After billions of years of chaos and cooling, the planet was no longer a ball of fire. Now it harbored primitive oceans, and its atmosphere was beginning to take shape. But something was still missing: life. How, in such a hostile environment, could the miracle of existence emerge? The answer lies in how the universe works. Even in chaos, there is a surprising capacity to create order. It was in this scenario, around 3.9 billion years ago, that the Archean Eon began. It's as if the Earth has just opened its eyes to a new chapter. In the dark, turbulent oceans, a chemical dance was about to give rise to the first signs of life. Imagine simple molecules interacting, reacting, and forming increasingly complex compounds. These compounds somehow came together into structures called protocells, the precursors to the living cells we know today. These protocells were incredibly simple, but they already brought something that would change everything: the ability to replicate. And so, life began. Think about it. Every living thing you know, including yourself, has its roots in these little clusters of molecules that one day decided to become something more. It's almost like a story of overcoming, where life insisted on existing, even against all odds. Now, a reflection. All of this happened in an environment that seemed completely uninhabitable. The air was full of toxic gases, the heat was unbearable, and the oceans, far from being blue, were a murky soup of chemical elements. And yet, life came. If this isn't proof of adaptability and resilience, what is? But the story doesn't stop there. Life that started so simple soon began to diversify. The first bacteria, known as cyanobacteria, emerged. They were microscopic, but they held a powerful secret: photosynthesis. These little creatures began capturing sunlight and turning it into energy. And the byproduct of this process? Oxygen. Yes, the same oxygen you breathe today began to be produced by tiny beings that lived in primitive seas. Now imagine this. For billions of years, these bacteria worked silently, transforming Earth's atmosphere. They released so much oxygen that they ended up causing one of the first ecological disasters: the Great Oxidation. For many organisms at the time, oxygen was toxic, and this led to mass extinction. But paradoxically, it was this same oxygen that created the conditions for the emergence of more complex life forms. This incredible story reminds us of something important. Even moments of crisis and destruction can lead to great transformations. Just as Earth had to face eons of chaos to become a habitable planet, we also face challenges that often shape us for something greater. And if you're wondering why all this matters, take a moment to reflect. Every breath you take, every plant you see around you, every life on the planet is a direct result of this billion-year journey. Without the primitive bacteria, without the murky seas, and without the catastrophic events, you would not be here today. But how did these microscopic bacteria give rise to increasingly complex creatures? And how did the planet go from dark seas and toxic gases to the scenario we know today? This brings us to the next phase of Earth's history, a time where life exploded in diversity and began to conquer new territories. Before we continue, I want to invite you to be part of this journey. If you are as fascinated as I am with the story of our origin, subscribe to the channel now and activate the bell so you don't miss the next chapters of this incredible saga. Oh, and don't forget to like the video. It's a simple gesture, but it really helps to bring content like this to more people. After all, understanding our history helps us value the present even more. So let's explore what happened next together. Are you ready? Terra had taken her first steps. The planet, which was once just a hell of lava and toxic gases, was now home to seas full of microscopic life. But what came next was a spectacular leap forward. The Phanerozoic Eon, beginning around 542 million years ago, brought the Cambrian explosion, one of the most fascinating moments in the history of life on Earth. In a relatively short period of time, the planet went from being dominated by microorganisms to becoming a true biodiversity laboratory. Incredible creatures began to emerge, each one more peculiar than the last. Imagine the scenario: trilobites roaming the seas, gigantic mollusks and life forms so different that they could easily be confused with science fiction monsters. It was the Cambrian period, where life began to experiment with shapes, sizes, and strategies that had never been seen before. But why did this happen so suddenly? What triggered this explosion of life? Scientists still debate this issue, but one of the most accepted hypotheses is that increasing levels of oxygen in the atmosphere created perfect conditions for life to thrive and evolve. However, this period of exuberance came with a high cost. The first mass extinctions began to shape Earth's history. In the Ordovician period, for example, around 443 million years ago, a devastating glaciation eliminated around 60% of marine species. Imagine a world where giant 2-meter arthropods ruled the seas, only to be swept away by the relentless force of the ice. The Earth seemed to be in a constant game of creation and destruction, where only the most resilient survived. And yet, life persisted. During the Silurian period, the oceans began to calm down, and temperatures began to rise again. It was during this period that the first fish with jaws appeared, starting a new lineage that would one day lead to the sea giants we know today. But the most impressive thing was the conquest of a new territory: dry land. Have you ever stopped to think about what it must have been like when the first plants and animals decided to explore dry soil? They had no idea what awaited them, but they paved the way for a new era. And therein lies the break in the pattern. Why does life always insist on seeking the unknown? What makes a plant struggle to grow in arid soil, or a fish try to breathe out of water? The answer seems to be embedded in the very DNA of life, the desire to survive, to conquer, to expand your horizons. But the real spectacle began in the Devonian period. Here, the seas bustled with activity. It was at this time that the first amphibians began to take their cautious steps on land. Imagine the scenario: a strange fish, called tiktaalik, with fins that functioned like primitive paws, crawling out of the water in search of something more. This small, courageous movement would mark the beginning of a revolution, the transition from aquatic to terrestrial life. At the end of this period, the Earth began to transform again. Dense, lush forests began to emerge, releasing even more oxygen into the atmosphere, and with that, new challenges and opportunities emerged. Giant insects, like dragonflies the size of modern birds, began to dominate the sky, while the first land predators ventured to the ground. The world was becoming more complex, but also more dangerous. But what happens when the balance is broken? The Carboniferous period, which came soon after, brought an abundance of plant life, but also conditions that would one day form the large reserves of coal we use today. However, the Earth never stands still. With every advance, there is a setback, and with every creation, there is destruction. This cycle seemed to be the golden rule of the planet. And here's the question: if life was able to overcome extinctions, extreme climate change, and even global catastrophes, what does this tell us about the future? Are we ready to learn from these lessons, or will we continue to push the limits of what our planet can support? Before continuing this journey, don't forget, Earth's history is also our history. Every piece of coal we burn, every forest we admire, carries millions of years of evolution and resilience. So, subscribe to the channel, like the video, and share this journey with other people. After all, understanding the past is the first step to protecting the future. And in the next chapter, we'll find out how Earth faced its biggest challenge yet. Are you prepared? The Earth, in its constant dance of creation and destruction, reached a new milestone. About 298 million years ago, everything on the planet began to come together, literally. Tectonic plates slowly moved, joining separate continents into a single, colossal landmass, Pangaea. Imagine looking at a globe where all the lands we know today were connected into a single gigantic supercontinent, surrounded by a single vast ocean, Panthalassa. It was a different world, where the geographic boundaries we know simply didn't exist. Pangaea was so immense that its interior, far from direct access to the ocean, faced extreme climates. Large deserts formed in the center of the continent, while coastal regions remained milder and more habitable. This environment created unique fauna and flora, and the Earth seemed to be thriving again after so many catastrophes. It was during this period that seed plants, called gymnosperms, began to dominate. They were more resistant, adapting to the dry climates of the supercontinent. At the same time, giant insects, such as dragonflies the size of birds and cockroaches, larger than our hands, reigned over the Earth's ecosystem. But it wasn't just plants and insects that were evolving. In this transformed world, new types of animals began to appear. Among them, the first truly terrestrial reptiles. A notable creature from this era was Dimetrodon, a predator with a large sail on its back, possibly used to regulate its body temperature. He looked like a cross between a lizard and something out of a science fiction movie. This reptile was one of the first synapsids, a group that would eventually give rise to mammals, including us. Meanwhile, the calm was just the surface. Beneath the feet of these creatures, the Earth was restless. Volcanic activity intensified, releasing toxic gases and ash into the atmosphere. The changes were subtle at first, but they began to accelerate. The planet's average temperature fluctuated, and oxygen levels, which previously sustained the giant insects, began to drop. Something was about to happen. Something devastating. And then came the greatest catastrophe the planet has ever seen, the Great Permian Extinction, some 252 million years ago. Also known as the Great Dying, this event was the deadliest in Earth's history. It is estimated that 95% of marine species and 70% of terrestrial species have become completely extinct. To put this into perspective, almost all life on Earth has been wiped out. What could have caused such devastation? The answer most accepted by scientists is a combination of factors, but the main culprit appears to have been the intense volcanic activity in the region we now know as Siberia. Massive eruptions released enormous amounts of carbon dioxide and methane into the atmosphere, creating a runaway greenhouse effect. Temperatures rose, the oceans lost oxygen, and conditions for life became unsustainable. The Earth has entered a total ecological collapse. And it wasn't just that. Volcanic eruptions also released ash and sulfuric gases that blocked sunlight, creating an effect similar to a nuclear winter. Plants, unable to carry out photosynthesis, began to die. Without plants, the herbivores starved to death, and then the carnivores succumbed as well. The cycle of life was brutally interrupted. However, even in the midst of this apocalyptic scenario, Earth found a way to start over. Somewhere, small hardy species managed to survive. Mollusks, sharks, and some primitive forms of amphibians and reptiles were the survivors of this event. They adapted to new conditions and became the ancestors of many species that we know today. It's almost as if Earth is restarting its history, wiping the slate clean to allow for a new era. Now think about it. The Great Extinction was a brutal reminder of how delicate the balance of life on Earth is. What happened back then may seem distant, but the echoes of that event still resonate. Today, we face climate change that, although slower, has frightening parallels to what happened 252 million years ago. It is an opportunity to reflect. Are we learning from the history of our planet? And so, after millions of years of recovery, the Earth began to transform again. The survivors of the Great Death began to evolve, diversify, and dominate a new world. Among them, the first steps towards what would become a new era would emerge, the age of dinosaurs. But before we embark on this fascinating journey, how about making sure you don't miss any details of this epic story? Subscribe to the channel right now, activate the bell to receive notifications, and leave a like. It's a small gesture that helps us continue to bring you incredible content like this. After all, the history of our planet is as fascinating as it is important, and it is far from over. Stay tuned to find out what happened when the first giants started walking the Earth. After the Great Extinction, Earth seemed like a barren desert, a silent world marked by the almost total absence of life. The planet had undergone its greatest test, but against all odds, it survived. Small sparks of life continued to shine amidst the darkness, resilient survivors who carried within them the potential to rebuild the world. These seemingly insignificant organisms proved that even in the face of total devastation, life finds a way. It was from this point that the story took a new direction. Over time, the planet began to recover. Volcanoes, which had once devastated the world, now gave rise to fertile lands. New species began to emerge, taking advantage of the changed conditions. This period of renaissance marked the transition to a new era, the Mesozoic era, better known as the Age of Dinosaurs. But before we look at these giants, it is important to reflect on what this new beginning teaches us. Think about it. Earth not only survived the greatest mass extinction in its history, but it also used that devastation as a launching point for something new and extraordinary. This is a lesson that resonates with all of us. How many times do we face events that feel like the end? How many times do we think there is no way out? And yet, Earth's history shows that with resilience and adaptation, new beginnings are always possible. When the first giant reptiles began to emerge, they found a world shaped by destruction but full of opportunity. Animals like Scutosaurus and Lystrosaurus paved the way for the emergence of dinosaurs. These first land giants survived a still unstable planet, facing extreme weather conditions and an environment that continued to change. They were the true pioneers of an era that would soon be dominated by the greatest beings to ever walk the earth. And then finally, about 180 million years ago, dinosaurs began to emerge. These incredible creatures have dominated the planet for more than 165 million years, adapting to different environments and evolving in ways that continue to fascinate and inspire today. But as you already know, not even they were immune to the cycle of creation and destruction that defines Earth's history. Another mass extinction would drive them to extinction, but leave room for new protagonists, mammals, and eventually, us. However, before we move forward, it is important to look back. What have we learned from this journey through time? We have learned that life is incredibly fragile, but also incredibly adaptable. We learned that the Earth, despite its ability to regenerate, has limits. And most importantly, we learned that we are part of a much larger story, a story that began billions of years ago and continues to unfold. If Earth's journey teaches us anything, it's that every choice matters. Every action we take today has the power to shape the future, just as the catastrophic events of the past have shaped the present. Just as the Earth adapted and evolved, we also have a responsibility to do the same, to learn from our mistakes and build a more sustainable and balanced future. Now, we have reached the end of this epic journey through our planet's past, but the story does not end here. There's still so much to explore, from the mysteries of the Age of Dinosaurs to the incredible transformations that led to the rise of humans. And we want you with us on this ongoing adventure. If you liked this dive into Earth's history, subscribe to the channel right now. Activate the bell so you don't miss any of the next chapters of this fascinating saga. Like the video and leave your comment about what surprised or moved you most on this journey. Your participation is essential so that we can continue to bring incredible content like this. Finally, a huge thank you for following us this far. You are part of this story, and together we can continue exploring the secrets of our planet and the universe. Until the next video, where we will continue this incredible journey through time and space. Until then, take care of the planet. After all, it's the only home we have. And remember, Earth's history is, deep down, our own history. Thanks, guys.